Let us pray. Gracious and forgiving Lord, you who are our gentle shepherd, our good shepherd, you who are our masterful and merciful master, we just give thanks for this time and for yet another opportunity to come together. We ask that you make your presence known to both Trey and I as we embark upon a conversation this night. And we ask that you just bless all of those who are listening. Regardless of the time that they're listening, we know that you are God who makes yourself available at all times. So let them be known to you. We ask that you will guide our conversation this night, and that as those who listen to us and as they process it, we ask that you will lead them also, so that the word that you would have us to hear and the things that you would have us to reflect and to ponder on, that we know that we are doing so with you. God, you know that our needs, and you know the needs of all of those who are listening. You know of those who are struggling with the loss of loved one, those who are dealing with issues of health, those who are deeply concerned about the things that are going on in their communities. And so, God, we just ask that you will speak words of peace to all of them, so that we might, in this very difficult time in the lives of all of us, know that you are there and that you are as concerned about things that are going on as we are. And then, God, we just ask that you will speak words to us, that you will make us be people that are more than just lifting up the concerns to you, that you will be able to use us to be a part of the answering to the problems that exist. For God, we know that the ultimate answer to all of the things that we're dealing with, whether it is loneliness or our sense of abandonment, our sense of frustration or our sense of disappointment, is that the thing that helps us with all of it is to know that we are loved. And so for us to not only know your love and know the power of your love, we have to feel that in the people of whom you put us in community with. So we just ask that you will lead us in the ways that we can be a more compassionate and have more empathy for the people who are around us, so that we will always know that we're not going through this alone, that not only are you there, but the people of whom you have called to place in upon our lives are there as responsive to us. And then, oh God, let us not only focus on who you place in our lives, but that we might be open to who it is that you would place us into the lives of others. So God, we thank you for this moment and for this time, and we just look forward to what will be revealed to us in our sharing this day. Amen. Hello. I want to welcome you to Hobson UMC on YouTube. I am VH Sonny Dixon Jr., the lead pastor here at Hobson, and I want to welcome you to our weekly conversation that I have with my son Trey as we discuss the upcoming lectionary passage for this Sunday, which is the fourth Sunday of Easter. And then we spend some time just in catching up with one another and things that are going on in our lives. And so it is always an honor for us when we hear from you, and that you said that you have listened to the program and that there was something that we said that either brought you a sense of comfort or something that challenged you in this day and time. We know that there are a lot of options that you have, and the fact that you choose to spend some time with us, we're always humbled by that. Want to encourage you, if there are things that you want to hear us comment on or have suggestions for us, please let us know that while you're not here, and maybe we'll bring a few of you in and to share in this conversation with us on a weekly basis. But regardless of that, we want to certainly be able to share with you, and because you have invested your time in this, we want to make sure that we honor your time by talking about some of the things you want to hear. Thank you once again for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy our conversation this week. Always an important time whenever we gather at Hobson, whether it is in person for worship for small group meetings, or even when we're here in the studio, sharing on a weekly basis to share with one another those things that give us a sense of joy and those things that give us some concerns. Always an important for us when we're celebrating our joys to lift up people who are connected to this congregation or friends to this congregation, birthdays. And we've got some important birthdays this week that are coming up. I want to remember this week, encourage you at some point during the week to lift up Brenda Dismute, who is having a birthday this week, Pat Jones, a friend of mine from Vanderbilt, and a colleague of Herbert Marbury, Lindsay Godwin, a tireless worker in our community for young people, Rashida Fatago, Linda Manning, who has helped me many times and helps me around some sensitivity, particularly as a social worker for people who are incarcerated, want to lift her up. Barbara Garcia, who is retired now, a retired deacon, but for a long time was in the Episcopal office and always a great friend of Hobson. Rosalind Robinson is also want to lift her up. And Reverend Megan Houston. Some of you all will remember her husband, who used to come, and for a short period of time when we were without a pianist, he led us with his banjo. So Willie, want to just, but it's Megan's birthday this week, so we want to lift her up. We've got some special birthdays within the congregation this week that we want to share with you. Melissa, who I am sure is already planning all of her activities with Crystal and Jakai. We want to lift up Melissa. Alyssa, Pam's daughter, is having a birthday. I think she started celebrating at the first part of April, even though her birthday is not until the 30th. I think she celebrates all the entire month. And then finally, Greg Reynolds. So we want to ask that you hold them in prayer this week and give thanks for another year and for an opportunity for them to circle around the sun one more time. As a time of prayer, we want to, for over a year that we've been doing this show, we have been on a weekly basis been asking for prayers for Foy Du Bois and his wife Janet. We will celebrate his life on Saturday. He passed this past Monday. And we continue to ask for prayers for Janet and for his daughter Stephanie in this time, and give great thanks for all of the members of Hobson who have been supportive of her during this time, and just ask that you continue to be in prayer for them. Ask for prayers for a young man who's also been with us a few times, one of my daughter's former students, Keelan Neal. Keelan had a seizure and last week, and was rushed to the hospital where he ended up having to have a tumor removed from his brain, and we're praying for speedy recovery for him. Ask for prayers for all of our students and teachers within the district who have been taking the 10 Ready, and for the next phase of that, I think they brought in the students who have been at home to come in and take it first, and now the students who have been in present will be taking it. We ask for prayers for that. Bruce Hawkins has asked for prayers for a friend of his, Ricardo, whose wife passed this past week. And then I just want to give a thanksgiving and a joy for my dear friend and colleague at Harriet Bryan, who is the senior pastor at Madison Street United Methodist Church. They recently, in a partnership with RIP Medical Debt, eradicated the medical debt of a number of Tennesseans and people in Mississippi. I think the total, I think in Tennessee was somewhere around $2.5 million worth of debt. And some over $400,000 in Mississippi. And so we just want to give thanks for them. It was something that they took on in the midst of the pandemic. While they were not in the church, that did not mean that the church was not out and doing what it could. So we give prayers of thanksgiving for them. As always, I encourage you that if you have special prayers that you want me to know about, you can send me a text message, email, call me up, however it is, because I believe that the number one thing that we do as a congregation, as a community of faith, is to be in prayer with one another, both in joys and in concerns. So make sure that we have those as a part of our list, so that we can be in prayer for you. And as always, we believe in the power of prayer, and we thank God that God is always listening and is always there to answer those prayers for us. Amen. Our scripture lesson for this week, the fourth Sunday of Easter in Year B, comes from John's Gospel, the 10th chapter, and we'll be reading for you verses 11 through 18, and I will be using the New Revised Standard Version. And Jesus said, "I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand, who is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and runs away, and the wolf snatches them and scatters them. The hired hand runs away because the hired hand does not care for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that do not belong to this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock, one shepherd. For this reason, the Father loves me, because I lay down my life in order to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have the power to lay it down, and I have the power to take it up again. I have received this command from my Father." This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Trey, this has been a week that, in looking at this passage, this is the fourth Sunday in Easter, and it's always the Good Shepherd Sunday. As a part of the readings for this week, it's always Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. That's a part of this. And I must admit that there have been times that, not being a part of an agrarian society, of just the images that Jesus shares, particularly this one of the Good Shepherd, it's been one that I've struggled with, and a lot of people have struggled with. But I think in order for us to become a part of it, we have to remember the context into who Jesus was speaking to, and for them, it was spot on. In John's Gospel, let me say that there are 7 sayings that Jesus said that I am. And as the first part of this, in the early part of John's Gospel in the 10th chapter, he says, "I am the gate," where he's talking about this whole entry into where the sheep are. And now he says, "I am the good shepherd." I have, quite honestly, I have never never seen. I've been to a sheep pen, and I have been around some sheep before, and I must admit, and in particular, I've heard stories about sheep, and there are times that I kind of resent the fact that that Jesus kind of compares us all to a sheep. But when you go deeper into it and you understand the vulnerability that sheep have, their inability to be able to defend themselves. Sheep, they say sheep don't fight. A good friend of mine, Trey Tex Thomas says, I don't know if we really are sheep, because all the sheep I know in church, they know how to fight. But real sheep are not animals that are aggressive by nature. They are animals that just tend to wander and to stray and to and their main focus is trying to find something to eat, and so from that standpoint, there are times that I identify with being a sheep and understanding the need of having a good shepherd. But for the purpose of this week, and probably what I will go with on tomorrow, is wondering just how Jesus might tell this story and what analogy he might come up with if he were telling it to us today as a reference. And so in order to do that, I think we have to, even for this story, have to go back and to look at why does this conversation come up? And he is talking to the Pharisees, and the Pharisees that he is, he's sharing this while at the same time talking, to the disciples. It is a response of what happens in the 9th chapter. And I want to encourage those of you who are listening to go back and read the story in the 9th chapter. It is one that, as soon as you open up and look at it, you will know, because it is the time of when Jesus heals a blind man. And there is this blind man who is a beggar. He's on the side of the road. And Jesus goes by, and when he sees him, I imagine that in his plea of trying to get help, we know from our own experience of seeing beggars, they generally will give you some story. I lost my job, or I've lost because of COVID. I don't have any place to stay, or I am a veteran of the war. They generally give you a story, and we believe that, at least I believe, that he probably gave them a story of why he was out there begging and why he needed some assistance from them. Because the story lets us know that when the disciples see him, they inform us that this man was blind since birth. And they want to ask, they asked Jesus, now, who was it that sinned? Whether it was this man, sitting inside of his mother, or whether it was the parents, because they were people who believe, and it was taught that if you had some issue, in this case, the blindness was the cause of sin, and so they wanted to know. And Jesus, in the moment, at first, probably rather than saying, to them, very bluntly, look, that doesn't matter, what you're talking about. He just says, look, neither one of them. That in essence, things happen. And in this case, it is there and it exists, and so that you might be able to see the work that God can do even in this moment. And we know that he ends up making a salve out of spitting in the ground and mixing it up and putting some mud and putting it on his eyes. And he ends up regaining the sight. After he regains his sight and he's going, and he's elated, and he is going and is going toward the temple and going and telling people, look, I have gotten my sight. I have been brought back not brought back, because he had never really been a part of the community, but now he will be able to be a part of the community that he had stood on the outside of for so long. And the Pharisees that greet him are not impressed, because they want to know, how did all of this happen? And particularly, how did it happen? Because it took place on the Sabbath. So they're just outraged, and they're so outraged when the guy says, "Look, I don't know who did it. Yeah, I was blind, I couldn't see." And then after I got my sight back and washed my eyes and came up, he was gone. So I don't know who did it. All I know is I once was blind, but now I see. So they end up going to his parents, and they asked the parents, "How did this happen? Tell us." And the parents said, "Look, we don't know." Because they were fearful of being ostracized, because for them, surely this didn't happen. It didn't happen by one of the Pharisees. One of the religious leaders didn't do it. There was no signs, no sacrifice. Nothing was done in order for this to be able to happen. And so they just said, "Look, he grown. You got to talk to him about that." And they eventually do go back to him, and they find him. And when they find him, he just tells them, "Look, I told you once, y'all don't believe me. And all I know is, I can see it. So it must have been somebody connected with God in some kind of way, because I can see." And so they, before he can even get back into before he can get into the community, they kick him out and say that he does not belong. Jesus, hears all of this, and because the guy ended up finding him, and telling him, Jesus, when he heard that he'd been put out, Jesus went to him, and said, "Hey, what's going on?" He said, "Look, I was blind. I got my sight back. I don't know how. I told him, and the guy who did it, he was great, wonderful and stuff." And Jesus finally reveals to him, "I'm the one," and he gives honor and praise to this one who has restored his sight. And so then we go to the 10th chapter, and the Pharisees are wanting to know, how the hell you do this? Look, we've already dealt with you one time before, because you're doing some blasphemous stuff, and we are sick of your butt. And we got to get rid of you. And so they says to them, "Look, you all been getting the whole story wrong. You all said that you all are sent, and you all are nothing but some bad shepherds." Now, I think it's important for us to kind of visualize where this comes in. Whenever Jesus comes into Jerusalem, except for the last time when he came in, for during Palm Sunday, but all the times he came in, Jesus always came in through the sheep's gate. And that was the place of where they would have the sheep and the lambs and the sheep that were there to be sold for sacrifices. And so they would have been familiar, and they would have seen him going through, and they would have seen the commerce and going. And so that becomes the backdrop of which Jesus says to them, "Look, I'm the good shepherd. I'm not calling y'all bad shepherds, but bad shepherds are the folk. I mean, a shepherd is supposed to take care of the sheep, lead the sheep in, take care of them, and not set up these boundaries and set up these rules to where they are never a part of a part of the flock. And that's not why I'm here. And it is the shepherd who has the responsibility of protecting and caring for them. And when he is saying this, they their image of the sheep. And knowing, for us, we always see this picture of the Good Shepherd, and Jesus is always dressed in a, real shiny white robe, and, his, blonde hair, is all laid, the perm's doing real good and stuff, and he's got this lamb on his shoulders, and the lamb is real clean and stuff, But for them, the image would have been of sheep that are dirty, they're smelly, and they have probably been off in the mud. They have probably not gotten to the pool of Bethesda, which at that time was the sheep pool, where they would take them to wash them before the sacrifice. They are just viewing this dirty, this no good, no count, as they had looked at that man. For many years, that beggar who stood out there that had no value, no resources. I think it did something for me this week as I was reading this passage on Sunday, getting ready for this past Sunday, getting ready for this week. And as I was reading it, I had the news on, and they were doing some recap of the trial for the officer, and they were showing the tape of George Floyd. And I could not help but believe that on this time, that if Jesus was talking, that Jesus would have said that those who are the good shepherds, those who are the followers of mine, look more at what they need to do and able to protect those who are the most vulnerable in our society, those of whom the powers and the authorities have written off, those of whom with the same kind of arrogance that we saw in the police officer that put his knee on George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. That it called for us, and that the good shepherds and the people are those of whom put themselves at risk in order to be able to do something in order for the sheep. I think that there was a time of rejoicing for this story, that when Jesus saw the 17-year-old young lady of whom was walking down the street on her way to go on a Memorial Day to go to the convenience store and to get some her young friend to get some snacks for the day, and had the wherewithal to take out her camera and to stand there unwavering. When you look at that video, she never moved. And even though you saw the officer looking at her with the arrogance and the defiance and just saying, look, probably looking in the eyes and saying, you next, you're interfering with me, you are questioning my authority. That Jesus celebrated, and it was Jesus that gave her the power in that moment. I see the others in the crowd who stood around and who questioned. Now, maybe, they were not in the position to do anything else. Those who were in the position, those other officers who were standing around him, they were. And I think that for me, that's the story and what Jesus is saying to those who are there, that when you have the power, true power and authority that is called by God, elevates and provides for safety and provides for care for the people, in particular the people who are most vulnerable in our society, those of whom we have chosen that we wanted to discard. And so, this Sunday, we're going to take a look at what does it mean for us and what is our call and how it is, particularly those of whom say that we are followers of Jesus Christ. Of course, Jesus is the good shepherd, but there are those whom Jesus says in the story that are hired by, and those who are employed by the shepherd, as all of us, I think, are called into. And I hope that we're not those kind of shepherds that say, hey, look, they ain't ours. They're not one of us. They don't belong to us. They don't belong to the flock. Because Jesus ultimately says in the thing, look, all of them belong to me. There are no others. And that when we're talking about how do we move forward now that the trial is over and now that the verdict and he has been found guilty on all three charges, where do we move forward? And people are asking the question, and I think the question lies within this story of where Jesus says that we are to be like the Good Shepherd. And when we're like the Good Shepherd, then the first thing that is the foremost and important is to take care of those who are in our society that are the most vulnerable. So we're going to be looking at what does it mean for us to be a shepherd, and how is it that we move beyond establishing the others in our midst that we write off, and how as we become more inclusive and be reminded that we all belong to God. Amen. I just believe, and maybe to some degree hope and pray that that by the time that Mason's 18, 19 years old, that he will question, well, why, Daddy, why you still walk around like that? I mean, the police are not our enemies, but it will be hard for anybody who has gone through it, just to simply say now, because see, here is, and I had this discussion with a couple of people a couple of days ago. Him being guilty does not bring George Floyd back. He's still dead, and how the conversation got up, he said, well, at least, if somebody did it today and did it to you, you can know that, they probably will be found guilty. I said, no, I won't know. If I had been George Floyd and it happens in the future and there's still, the whole kind of thing of how we respond and how we deal with some stuff, And like you said, with him, this started over a $20 counterfeit bill, that it escalated to that degree. Or you got an air freshener, which says to me, here are opportunities that we can use anything to abuse our power. And that's got to be, I think, where there is a change of a mindset. If we got a thing in Knoxville, Austin East, a 17-year-old student was shot. No charges are going to be brought against the officers there because they're saying it was an altercation. They were going, the guy had a gun, it was going, and whether or not it was handled right, at least the body footage says that there was something that may have justified. They're saying in the case of another one that was taking place, they were justified in that. But the question is, what for the young lady in Columbus, Ohio, that got shot? They said, well, she had a knife, and it was so you had to make some kind of decision. Those kind of areas make you deal with one thing, but when you say that they started over a busted tail light, they started over you knocked on the wrong door, they started because you had a $20 bill that at most all you would have gotten was a citation for, that it got elevated to that point, even elevated to the point that there were 4 officers there. Yeah. Or you go back to, Eric Garner. He was selling cigarettes on the street. At some point you just have to ask, why do we allow these kind of things to escalate? And I think they escalate simply because you don't look at that person. I don't believe that he looked at George Floyd as a person. He could not see him as another human being. In fact, he probably saw him as being less than something, because I've seen people be more responsive to pets and stuff, saying, hey, you got a collar on that dog too tight, and you need to take that collar off, But to say, I can put my knee on a person for 9.5 minutes, that's just,
Okay, all right. You know what? I'm going to, at this point, curb my optimism. I'm going to, starting at this moment, I'm going to take all that I know and all that I believe about our justice system and how black men and black women are viewed, and the anxiety that some white police officers feel when it comes to black people. You know what? I'm gonna put that in my past, in my rearview mirror, in hopes that me releasing that baggage that I carry on a daily basis, that hopefully with that process that a change will come. Like, one of the things that I heard from, I don't know what his name, but I guess the attorney, the district attorney or whatever for that area. And, one person can't do it all, but everybody can do something, and to make a change. And so I don't know what I could do. I don't know what I can do besides just try to release some of that anxiety and not be so caught up in, our history. Because truth be told, because we saw this repeatedly on CNN, MSNBC, and all of the news outlets, this whole George Floyd saga, that, maybe a change will come. And maybe, this will be the deciding factor for the next time a black man is stopped by the police, that they say, what? I remember George Floyd, and I remember, what Chauvin, whatever, what he went through, and that he's in prison, and that if I do this, if I don't act right towards this black man, that I could be in prison with him. And I hope that, that all of the police officers that have this kind of ability in them, just take a split second and think about how their actions could wind up, like Chauvin. So I don't know that George Floyd is the person that, will cause this change, right? And I don't mean to say this in a cynical way or be diminishing to, his life and who he is or in his death. But I think the bigger change will be because that man was convicted of it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right? So like I said, if there's one police officer that is on the path of destruction, that looks at black people and is scared and want to pull that gun, if that just split second he thinks about that and changes his whole train of thought, his whole behavior because of that, I think it'll be a win. And that's the way I'm going to look at it from now on.
Okay. I do not have the name. I will have it by tomorrow for the message if I include it in that. But also on Monday, there was a lady in Buffalo, New York, who had lost her job because she had intervened when an officer was doing something wrong and had said something, and because she interfered and stopped the officer from progressing to the point where it got to with, in the case of George Floyd, she was fired and let go. She was I don't know if she was reinstated, but she was given all of her pension back and received all of her money that she would have said, had she been there, because they said that she was right. in intervening. And so while I applaud your efforts, and it would be nice for you to do that, I'm still asking, though, as your father, to still move as though the change hasn't happened. So when you are pulled over, because to say let's live in a world where that doesn't happen, that means that when you get up and they pull up to your window, I mean, you got a car, that is subject to be stopped, and they're going to say this is that and that's that, So when you get, you say, because you got something, and to say, put your hands on top of the, officer, my hands on top of the wheel. I mean, it's just, hey, officer, what's going on? What's, I mean, I hope we can get to that, and I hope that maybe Mason can grow up in that world. But in the time of transition, just to completely go over and to make ourselves vulnerable, because, if all of a sudden they said in Minneapolis, we know the bad cops. And he was a bad cop beforehand. He had some things. So if they just went in, on yesterday and said, look, all y'all, and we know who you are, turn in your stuff right now. We'd rather not have any police than have bad police. That didn't happen. That the 3 guys who are going to later be on trial, there are probably some other folk. I mean, the police union paid for his defense.
Well, now, I mean, that's probably.
I mean, he's entitled.
He's entitled to it. I mean, if he pays his union dues.
Well, no, and I mean, everybody, even the guilty, are entitled to the defense.
Sure.
So I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that while there were some people that were in that, and I mean, I applaud those officers that came and said, hey, look, this is not what we do. This is not how we were trained. This was not how we were doing. But at the same time, I think that there were probably some other ones that probably on that that probably say, I'd have done the same thing.
Sure. And again, the people that were saying...
His problem was he should have taken that daggum camera from that girl. I mean, those are the kind of things, and so it is hard in this transition, and it is particularly hard at 68 years of age and trying to say, how do we move to that point, and particularly in looking at the message that, I'll be focusing on tomorrow, is that we need to move to that point, but how do you respond until you get to that point? Is always... Yeah. I want to thank you for tuning in and for our conversation. Once again, thank Trey for this time. As I was talking with Trey, I think one of the things that was helpful for me, and I want to suggest to all of us, is that we have to talk about this issue. We have to talk about what's happening, what's going on. And too many of us are having to deal with it alone in our own time, and so if anything, they're just in sharing in this moment, particularly as I recall the scripture of where that takes place in the context of community. And so I'm thankful, and I do encourage you, if you want to talk to me about it, give me a call. And because I think it's important that these conversations continue, because as Trey talked about the change that is needed, then we've got to talk about it, because we've got to figure out ways collectively to be able to do that, and to find ways to both celebrate and when we find ourselves in the midst of the anxiety. So thank you for tuning in. Hope we've given you something to think about. And then, as I say, if it's something you want to talk about, be sure to hit me up. But Thank you for your time.